वन नेशन वन इलेक्शन के सपने को साकार करने के लिए हमें आगे आना चाहिए।
Namaskar, good evening. The Narendra Modi cabinet today cleared a move that has potential to alter India's political and electoral landscape dramatically. Its impact can be so far-reaching that the pundits right now can only point out a superficial few changes. You're with Jist. I am Rahul Srivastav. Yes, after a lull of few months over it, the cabinet has cleared a bill for one nation, one poll. In fact, the BJP has issued a whip in Lok Sabha asking all its members of parliament to be present. Indications are that the bill can come in this winter session of parliament. Hypothetically, or as per the government's hypothesis, the move can bring in a lot of political electoral sanity. But that's hypothetically, I'll maintain. It includes an extremely complex and widespread tweaking of the laws of the land. Before all that happens, it will create a political tsunami of protests, especially from the opposition. It will make the entire political opposition to the BJP erupt like no eruption after the imposition of emergency in 1975. Listen in to what opposition leaders are saying, what BJP leaders are saying. In fact, M.K. Stalin, the Chief Minister of Tamil Nadu, has asked India to unite against this assault on the federal structure of the country.
नेशन वन इलेक्शन इसको लेकर पूरे देश में एक जो उत्साह की लहर है, क्योंकि हर 6 महीने में 3 महीने में इलेक्शंस होना इतना ज़्यादा खर्चा सरकार का होता है।
तो हम बिल आने का इंतज़ार करेंगे कि किस तरीके से वन नेशन वन इलेक्शन लागू होगा, क्या उसका खर्चा होगा, कितने ईवीएम्स और लगाने पड़ेंगे, कैसे सिक्योरिटी व्यवस्था होगी, किस तरीके से वीवीपैट मशीन जो कम है उसको लाने का काम होगा।
प्रधानमंत्री जी चाहते हैं वन नेशन वन इलेक्शन हो, हम लोग इसको पूरा समर्थन करता हूं।
There were hints this August that the government was about to press the start button on One Nation, One Poll when Prime Minister Narendra Modi spoke about it in his Red Fort address.
वन नेशन वन इलेक्शन के लिए देश को आगे आना होगा।
Let's first begin with a micro example to depict what One Nation, One Poll idea is all about. People of Haryana voted for the 10 Lok Sabha seats on the 25th of May 2024. They voted again for the assembly elections on the 5th of October 2024. That means within a span of 130 odd days, voters in Haryana voted twice. Same goes with the Maharashtra assembly, which voted right after Haryana. Similar is the case of Delhi in February next year when the assembly polls will be held. Now, the central government has made it clear that it plans to end this quickly. The Union Cabinet, led by Prime Minister Narendra Modi in September, had accepted the recommendations of a high-level committee headed by ex-President of India, Ramnath Kovind. For convenience sake, I will call it One Nation, One Poll. Since the Modi government started indicating its intent on One Nation, One Poll, the opposition reaction has been on expected lines. And that's why the execution of this move will be a climb over Mount Everest for this government, especially because it does not have 2019-like big numbers. The government depends on allies and its numbers are not as strong.
प्रैक्टिकल नहीं है और ये चलने वाला नहीं है। ये सिर्फ चुनाव जब बात है, कोई ना कोई कुछ मुद्दा नहीं मिल रहा उनको, ऐसी चीजें बात करने के लिए, इश्यू को डाइवर्ट करने के लिए वो बात करते हैं और इसीलिए और पूरे देश के लोग कोई मानने वाले भी नहीं हैं।
Now let's look at how widespread elections in India warrant the need for one nation, one poll. That's the base premise on which the government is pushing the elections. Now, at the start of 2024, 7 states were due to have elections. These were Arunachal Pradesh, Sikkim, Andhra Pradesh and Odisha in June 2024, Haryana, Jharkhand and Maharashtra in 2024. The year 2025 will witness the elections to one state assembly and one union territory, that is Bihar and Delhi. There are 4 states and 1 union territory with elections due in the year 2026. These states include West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, Assam, Kerala and Union Territory of Puducherry. In the year 2027, there will be elections to a group of 6 states, mainly Manipur, Goa, Punjab, Uttarakhand, Uttar Pradesh and Gujarat. Finally, in 2028, before the Lok Sabha polls in 29, the remaining 10 states will undergo state legislative assembly elections. Now, if so widespread are the electoral exercises, how can they all converge from one India, many elections, to one nation, one election? That's a question to be asked, warranting to be asked, because if elections are spread out so widely, how do you funnel them into one single process? The government thinks it has an answer. Prime Minister Modi had set up a panel headed by no less than the ex-President of India, Ramnath Kovind, to examine the issue. The Kovind Committee submitted its report in March this year to President Draupadi Murmu. The Union Cabinet accepted the report. There is a 2-step solution proposed by the Ramnath Kovind Committee, because right now the contours of the bill which has been cleared by the Union Cabinet are not very clear. So what we can talk about is what the Ramnath Kovind Committee had proposed. So there are 2-step process. The first step for one nation, one poll is synchronize Lok Sabha and state assembly polls in one line. The second step for ONOP is municipalities, panchayats at the same time as Lok Sabha and assembly polls. Means initially it will be one, and second there will be slow dovetailing of the entire election processes in the country. Now, the most critical element of the Kovind Committee report is when and how the exercise will be implemented. Because even if we are talking about that possibly the bill may come in this session, winter session of Parliament, when does it actually come into play? Now, the way forward, the government will create laws to restore ONOP. That's what the government claim is. Now, President will notify an appointed date once the bill becomes a law. The notification on day of the first Lok Sabha sitting after a Lok Sabha poll. That means that the one nation, one poll exercise has been cleared now as a bill, but it will kick in only from 2029, possibly. That's what logic really says. But the government is extremely tight-lipped on it, on whether this specific recommendation is going to be adhered to or not. One doesn't know what the bill really says. I will repeat that. Now listen to what the INB Minister Ashwini Vaishnav had said in September this year on what all needs to be done before the law is moved. So I assume that whatever happens now will be following what Ashwini Vaishnav had said.
Our government believes in creating a consensus on items which affect our democracy, our nation in the long run. Common electoral roll. एक पूरे देश में एक कॉमन इलेक्शन की जो रोल है वो होना चाहिए, वोटर लिस्ट होनी चाहिए. तो वो वोटर लिस्ट राज्य सरकार के सहयोग के से ही बन पाएगी.
Now, even if the bill comes up in the winter session, I think it's going to be a long road ahead, even if deadlines are changed as per the Ramnath Kovind Committee report. Why? The government has to first build a consensus on 2 major constitutional amendments. This cannot be possible because without these, state governments have to be on board. The 2 constitution amendment bills need, as per the Ramnath Kovind Committee report, a total of 15 odd amendments to the Constitution of India. Currently, Assembly's tenure is 5 years. Now, change is needed to cut the tenure assemblies elected after the appointed date. Now, in case the expiry is, this is in case when the expiry is beyond the term of the Lok Sabha. Now, historically, what's the fact? Is it always been so? Or it is an evolution that we used to have elections at one time together and then we started having many elections one year? Initially in India, that is from 1952, 2 elections were held in every 10 years. Then there were disruptions. There were disruptions, various reasons were. Their assemblies were dissolved and others. There was also a successful attempt to bring the board back to the shore as far as one nation, one poll is concerned in the past. Now, one nation, one many polls does pose a problem. Yes, multiplicity of elections. Several elections are being held every year. It's a fact that this casts a huge burden on the government businesses, workers, courts, political parties, candidates contesting elections, and civil society at large. We are not talking about another layer of elections which are held involving 140 crore people, and that's a local body election. We are not talking about mentioning that at all. Now, among the negatives as far as many elections, one nation is that 70 lakh people odd in this Lok Sabha poll alone, 70 lakh people were on poll duty. Now, where do they come from? They come from schools, government job officials, others are put onto poll duty. 12.08 lakh polling stations were to be manned by these 70 lakh people. 3.4 lakh central paramilitary forces were deployed. This is apart from the state police, which is deployed at during elections. Now, the total imandar expenses as far as elections Lok Sabha concerned, 70,000 crore was spent. That is the expense which we can say that officially went into holding a Lok Sabha elections. What is the average cost of state assembly elections? If one looks at all the states, there are big states like UP, there are small states like Meghalaya. So there are differences, but if we calculate an average, it is 2,333 crore each state. Now multiply it with 30-odd state assemblies and union territories and others. Then what happens that schools and education, state and administration machinery, central government offices, decision making because of the poll conduct is in place, that gets impacted because of multiplicity of elections. Schemes get disrupted, policies cannot be announced, policies cannot be implemented. But given the political atmosphere and the distrust of opposition parties in the central government, I don't think there is likely to be any consensus as far as the government and opposition are concerned. It does need 2 constitutional amendments, as I had said. NDA has 293 MPs. Constitutional amendments needs 2/3 majority. 2/3 majority. Changes are needed to be ratified by 50% of the state assemblies also. Now, will that clause be adhered to? That also is there. So where is the government going to get its numbers from? Because the question right now we ask is, are the BJP's allies like the JDU and the TDP on board as far as this move is concerned? Although the TDP and JDU are members of the cabinet. So in case the cabinet has cleared the bill, means that one can say that right now they are on board, but what happens in future, one doesn't really know. Now, Bihar assembly term ends in November 2025. The Bihar angle is very interesting. And that is why I say JDU role will be critical to this. And also the TDP. Now, the Andhra assembly terms ends in June 2029. Now, will these states whose term is beyond the Lok Sabha, will they agree to the remaining, their term remaining, will they agree to it? Now, state assemblies whose term will be ending before the Lok Sabha elections are also very crucial. Why? Because the recommendation of the Kovind Committee of the One Nation, One Poll says, once the transitions provisions are brought into play, the tenure of all state legislative assemblies constituted in any election after the appointed date would come to an end on the expiry of the full term of the House of the People, irrespective of when an assembly was constituted. This would result in the House of the People and all the state legislative assemblies being ready for a simultaneous elections at the end of its term. That's quite a mouthful, but it is how all elections will be brought in together. This is what the Ramnath Kovind Committee had said. Now, in the event of extraordinary circumstances when the simultaneous elections to any state legislative assembly cannot be conducted at the time of the general elections, the Election Commission of India can make a recommendation to the President to declare by an order that election to that legislative assembly may be conducted at a later date. So it can happen in case, because of circumstances of any natural, political or law and order. But there is a rider to it. The term of such legislative assemblies whose elections have been postponed, so constituted, shall not end 5 years. They shall end on the same date as the end of the full term of the House of the People, that is Lok Sabha, constituted after the general election. So even if state assembly election is not held with the Lok Sabha because of certain extraneous circumstances, and elections are held later, the term will end when the Lok Sabha term ends. Now, these are very difficult to digest changes for the opposition. It challenges the current perception or norm of federalism, this idea. Why should the fate of state assembly be by a letter of constitution be linked to the Lok Sabha? They are two different entities altogether. Parties like the DMK, that's what they are saying, is that why should state assemblies be exposed to the destiny of the Lok Sabha? What happens if the people don't repose faith in one party? That means there is a hung verdict in states repeatedly. Will terms of state assemblies keep getting synchronized till people vote a party, single party? Will that not amount, I ask a question, will that not amount to nudging the voter to a majority somehow, impairing the fairness or the spirit of the electoral process? Then there are charges by opposition that one nation, one poll will be unconstitutional and against the doctrine of the basic structure of the Constitution. I think in this case, what is my view? I think the public needs to decide. The Kovind Committee had sought opinion from the public on its mandate of one nation, one election. Now, what were the responses received from the citizen? If we look at the kind of responses and the volume, as of 28th February 2024, there were just 5,232 responses in a nation on a move which is going to impact 140 crore people. One thing I like to add here is that the one nation, one poll can bring a significant disadvantage also to the products of our democracy, to our regional parties, and create an advantageous position for the BJP and the Congress, the big two of the nation's politics. Because these big two have the resources, leaders, cadres, and the expertise to fight two levels of polls simultaneously. The regional players don't have that kind of wherewithal. Now, once elections of Lok Sabha are being held and assembly are being held, and Akhilesh Yadav or a Mamata Banerjee or a Biju Janata Dal leaders like Mr. Patnaik, they cannot come out of their state and campaign in other parts of the state. Can they think about expanding their footprint beyond their state, as they are planning to do right now? Arvind Kejriwal has moved from Delhi to Punjab. So I think the regional parties will get trapped defending their home turf. That's one of the negatives. Now, to be the devil's advocate here, regional parties and multiple polls are part of evolution of our democracy. This is how we have become. It's not something which we can wish away. Now, if we accept that amending this is necessary, if we are saying that amending this process of one nation, many polls is necessary, though it has evolved in such a way, then I have another question. All the poll practices which have crept into our election process, the role of money, muscle, and a not so strong election commission, or maybe an election commission with not sweeping autonomous powers, that is also an issue which has evolved out of our election exercise or our democracy over the since 1952. Then why not perhaps make a first stronger step for a more autonomous election commission? That's also an evolutionary element. Why don't you address it? Then in the case one on Bharti and others versus state of Kerala case, historic case, the Supreme Court had held that the power to amend is plenary. And the only limitation to this power is that the basic structure of the Constitution cannot be altered. And that the most important constitutional virtue is the rule of law and a free and independent judiciary. My final question here, is the present one nation, many polls situation disturbing the most important constitutional virtue, as I have stated earlier? Is it disturbing autonomy of the judiciary, the independence, the law and order in the country. If that is happening, yes, then one nation, one poll is needed. And if it is not, then the huge tectonic move, I will say, needs a much deeper scrutiny given the footprint or expected footprint of its impact. That's all we have on one nation, one poll, the move by the central government to clear a bill. Let's see what happens when the bill is moved for passing in Parliament. The BJP has already issued a 3-line whip for its members to be in House present on the 13th and the 14th. That's all we have on the issue today. We'll be back more on One Nation, One Poll. Thanks for watching.